'Cause I'm yours to keep if you want to.
Alrighty, we are live. Thank you for coming in to do this, man.
Of course. Thank you for having me.
Let's just jump right into it. What is your full name?
My full name is DeJuan Howard.
Okay. And where were you born?
Bellflower, California.
Nice. I forgot to ask you, but were you named after anybody?
Funny story. My mother she waited till I was in my 30s to tell me that there was a guy she had a crush on in her middle school years.
No way.
And his name was DeJuan, and he spelled it the same exact way. I don't know if she told my dad that.
Yeah.
But
that's funny.
She just came up with a name like, oh yeah, about DeJuan. But she said it was somebody that she had a crush on in middle school, and that name always stuck with her.
Yeah.
So
funny.
And the weird thing is that I had to pick a artist name that is just as difficult to remember how to pronounce, or not even pronounce, but how to spell.
Sure.
People forget my other S in Curtis. So
yeah. What's the reason behind that?
Behind Curtis, two S's?
Yeah.
It actually comes from a middle school out in Carson, California that I used to go to.
Okay.
During that time period at Curtis Middle School, for folks who are familiar know it's named after a pilot. I think it was Curtis Hammond. And that middle school was really where I kind of broke out of my shell. I used to be a super introvert. I wasn't really someone that liked to be the center of attention. I mean, the complete opposite of the things that I do now as an artist and producer. And so when I conquered those insecurities, I became Curtis King. That's the branded answer, but I mean, the real answer is that a buddy of mine used to go to King Drew Medical Center, and I met him at Curtis Middle School. So we just kind of brought Curtis King together. But I'll tell the other story. It sounds better.
It does. Well, the other story is nice. They both sound good. I mean, it's great, actually. So what was it like growing up in Bellflower?
I didn't, which is why it took me a second to remember where I was born, because you said that and I'm like,
where was I born?
Initially, I wanted to say Carson, but I was like, I wasn't born. That's not what my birth certificate says. But
okay.
I grew up in Carson, and it was interesting. It was interesting because in some ways, it gives you a space to enjoy your childhood.
Okay.
I was definitely blessed to spend time with my mom and dad, even though they were divorced. I spent time with my mom and my grandparents in Carson. And so coming up there, I wasn't really exposed, at least not voluntarily, to like the street culture and the things that exist out there, the gangs that are out there. So I kind of had a best of both worlds in that I was there. But then when I did go to Curtis Middle School, I did see, kind of an exposure of such to certain things. And so I got to see both sides of that, and that was really dope. So growing up there definitely grows you up fast.
Yeah.
But it introduced me to some amazing folks.
Cool. What kind of things were you into, like when you were a kid?
Nickelodeon.
Okay. TV.
A lot of TV. Snick at Night was one of those. Doug was definitely someone that I spent a lot of time watching TV. If I wasn't outside with the kids, the neighborhood kids, and, getting into stuff we shouldn't be getting into, but making makeshift ramps, because we had a hill. There was a street that I lived on called Hilford in Carson, and we had a hill that it's just, if you drove your bike down there, you knew you were going to be going faster than you've ever gone before.
Yeah.
And we're nowhere near bikers. We're kids. And somebody came up with the genius idea of putting a cardboard on top of a brick so that when you hit top speed.
Yeah, you'd just be flying.
And I flew a few times and came back in with stories I couldn't share.
Yeah, I was going to say, that sounds like an accident. Cardboard and brick is it's not ramp material.
It's not the way you want to do it. And it's amazing as I think about it and say it out loud that I did not break a bone.
Yeah.
Never broke a bone, at least, my legs and whatnot.
Yeah. Crazy, dude. Okay, cool. So some TV, some biking, some flying.
Yeah, a lot, and that's, it explains a lot of who I am today, is spending so much time with the television, and I don't mean just cartoons, like 90s infomercials. I don't know why that was something I got into. Maybe because I was up.
I was going to say, if you were up late, that was just you got
sucked
MASH.
into it. It was MASH, and it was some of that, right? So I definitely remember when that music came on, it was like, oh, it's that late.
Yeah.
It's late, but when the MASH comes on, it's that late. So I did spend a lot of time on TV. I really wasn't I became more social, but I really wasn't a social kid except for my circle of friends. We'd play pogs and all that outside, but it's mostly by the house. And Moms wasn't having it. Moms was like, you need to like get into Taekwondo, or you need to get into Little League, which is something I got into. And actually through doing that, it got me like a passion for baseball. It was my first passion ever, which was playing baseball.
Cool.
And that's when I found my favorite player, athlete of all time, which is Ken Griffey Jr. And so that kind of like showed me, I guess, glimpses of what the future holds in terms of my fandom of him.
Yeah.
Was kind of me understanding what it means to be a fan of something or someone.
Sure.
So yeah.
Cool. That's awesome, dude. What kind of stuff are your parents doing for work?
My mother was working for the Huntington Park Police Department.
Okay.
I believe in the records section. She wasn't an officer herself, but she worked there. And that's mostly what I remember as a child. My pops was into, I think it's called, it's basically the people that get called out for when an accident happens. He was taking photos. So I don't know if it's an insurance claim. I don't know exactly what field it was in, but he had his own business. And he also had a 1 hour photo lab in Compton.
Cool.
So
it's creative in a way.
Yeah, I mean, that was kind of my early exposure to entrepreneurship.
Yeah.
Was through kind of seeing how he maneuvered there in the city. And mind you, this is like right after the riots.
Yeah.
When he had his photo lab. And my mother would, you know, she would work for the Huntington Police Department, but she was really known for her playing the piano in church.
No way.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. So ever since I can remember, I've been in the church and I've seen my mother play. And that was kind of what they were doing, but just trying to make ends meet. It's like a lot of parents during that time.
Yeah, of course. You have siblings?
Yes. I have nothing but sisters and one brother.
You guys close?
Pretty close. Some closer than others, only because, you know, it's just kind of the nature of family. But the sisters on my mother's side, we definitely kind of we went through some challenges together.
Sure.
And it kind of brings you either closer together or makes you more volatile towards each other. But
totally,
thankfully, it made us more closer because we saw a lot of things in our coming up, and we had to literally raise one another, right? So,
sure.
Yeah, definitely.
Wow. Shit, I just lost my next question. Okay, so what about did you like school when you were growing up?
Yeah, there were things about school that I enjoyed. Like
okay.
I really enjoy English. English was my thing. I love making fictional stories. I was the only kid in the class that enjoyed writing essays because I just knew that I could have let my imagination run free. Mind you, this is years before I even thought about doing music. That was always my favorite. Couldn't stand math. I couldn't stand the idea of math, and I could get to the right answer, but if I didn't do it exactly how this showed me, then I did it the wrong way. And it's just something especially as it started getting to like algebra, and I was just like, I don't think it's in my cards to be. And my pops was a math teacher.
Okay.
So imagine that conversation.
Really drilled it.
Oh my, he was a math teacher, but he didn't really, I don't know if he could drill it in me because it just wasn't, I'm that other side of the brain that is more dependent upon the arts and operating from that place of creativity. That analytical side never really appealed to me.
Yeah.
So I think that's, kind of what opened the door to everything else that I'm doing now. But yeah, I enjoyed being creative in school. Those are my favorite days.
Sure.
Anything else, like wheel in the TV, I know it's gonna be a good day.
Yeah.
But anything where you're talking about open this up and get this, no, I'm good. No equations for me.
I was gonna ask, did you guys travel when you were younger? Or did you travel growing up?
Yeah. Actually, I have a lot of family in Louisiana. So we did a lot of traveling back and forth to Louisiana. Sometimes we have family reunions in Texas. It's kind of like a halfway point between our family in Louisiana. Lafayette, Louisiana, Baton Rouge, Louisiana. So I did do a lot of traveling during the summertime there. And it was awesome to experience that and bring a little bit of that home. I think that's probably where folks, when they listen to me talk long enough, they're like, there's like a little bit of a country twang to what you're doing. And I don't even notice it.
Yeah.
But between going and taking those trips and between like my grandparents and my mom's side, they were supremely country, and because of that, I picked up a lot of that stuff just vicariously, just being there.
Yeah.
Just the way they talk. So
Yeah. Nice. What was your first job?
Hollywood Video.
Yeah.
Hollywood Video. I lasted a week.
How old were you?
16.
Okay.
16. My first real job, Quiznos.
Okay.
Quiznos in
That's my
Carson,
spot.
California. Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure it's different working there than eating there.
Yeah.
You know?
Oh, I kid. No, man. And the smell of them just instantly brings me right back there. But that was my first job, was Quiznos. I was at a place where I was living with my moms in Carson, and she was the one that was more supportive of my mom and dad of my music. And she was like, look, you gotta figure out a way to generate some income. You're out of high school. You're not gonna, looks like you're not going to college, which I didn't for a second before I actually went back. And she was like, you got to figure out how to generate some income. And so a buddy of mine worked there and got me a job, and stayed there for probably about 3 or 4 years.
Oh, wow.
That might have been the longest job that I had.
Yeah.
Then I went to Starbucks for a day, and that didn't work. Yeah.
So with school, you passed on college and decided to go back?
Yeah, so initially, it was a much different time period than it is now. When I was graduating from high school, 2003, you had MI Institute, you had the Los Angeles Academy was another school out there. And it just seemed like when I went to the orientations, because my mom took me to both, right? She was the one that was more supportive of that. The things they were talking about in terms of possibilities afterwards just didn't seem like they were as predictable or as guaranteed as we thought at the time college was. And so we went there and we saw how expensive it was and sort of the entry fees. And she was like, yeah. And somehow, some way, somebody tried to convince me to do an orientation at DeVry, and I thought that was going to be the the next move. They told me that I'll be possibly making polyphonic ringtones.
Okay.
That's how they pulled me in, and I was like, yeah.
Sounds good.
Sounds good then. But but no,
The ringtone market was cracking at that point in time.
It was, but it'd be a
If you
shame
got
to
into
put all your
that.
stock in that right
Yeah,
right now. You
yeah.
might not be doing so well.
No, of course not.
But yeah, so in doing that, man, it was like I didn't know where there was this is not YouTube time.
100%.
Where's the education for
Yeah.
what I want to do?
Mm-hmm.
Who's gonna lay out a blueprint? And so I was like, you know what? I'm gonna figure this out. And I think when I was living with my mom, she gave me about a year to kind of figure it out, and I didn't figure it out. So I ended up getting a job, and then I went back because my mom came in. She saw I was making pretty good money for my age, and she saw that I was kind of like staying in my place. I was going to work and coming back into work, and she was like, I think it's time for you to look into something else. And she did it in such a way that it didn't feel like it was the parent coming down on you. She showed me a brochure she went and got, and she was like, look, they got a music program and this and that. And that's initially what I went to Orange Coast College for.
Okay.
Went to Orange Coast College thinking I'm going to do this music program, get out of here, get my certificate. Ended up falling in love with marketing.
Huh. Okay.
And I ended up getting my marketing certificate from taking this string of classes with a teacher named Daniel Morgan, or Dennis Morgan, Mr. Morgan. I just call him Professor Morgan, but he is the reason why I have such a passion for marketing. He's the reason why I treat marketing like an art form, while my entire career is built on campaigns, is because of that foundation and learning what makes people tick on a massive level, or what makes them want to buy, not asking open-ended questions when you're inquiring or when they're inquiring about a product. Little things that would seem like the basis of just any sales, I was being exposed to for the first time. And just every time I sat in those classrooms, I got ideas for me as an artist that I just wasn't getting anywhere else. So I just ended up not even going. The music program was full the whole time I was there. I was there for like 2 or 3 years. Didn't end up graduating from the college. Got my marketing certificate and went off running on MySpace.
Nice. Damn. Crazy. Okay.
Yeah.
So what was the process like, or when did you first start really getting into music? Let's go all the way from the beginning.
Sure. So 2002, 2003, I started getting into music. 2003, I graduated from high school.
Okay.
And I got into music off of pure chance. My buddy and I, he kind of wrote poetry on his own.
Okay.
and I wrote poetry, and that's not really something you share with your buddy in high school. That wasn't a thing at
Yeah.
that time. It wasn't like it wasn't as free as it is now, right? At that time, it was like, you know, ultra coming off of the DMX era, the Tupac era. This is a different type of hip hop audience. And so we didn't know. And then one day, I think he asked me, he said, "You ever thought about rapping?" And I was like, "Rapping? That sounds cool." And he gave me 30 minutes to write a verse, and I wrote a verse, and it was terrible, but he wrote his verse, and he was like, you think we should keep going?" I said, "Yeah." And we ended up kind of launching a rap career, but it wasn't until we went to a store that no longer exists called Electronic Boutique. It's kind of a GameStop at that time, that I decided to become a producer. I didn't know it at that time, but it was a decision between NBA 2K2 with Allen Iverson, I think was on the cover, and this game that I found in the used PlayStation section called MTV Music Generator.
Okay.
Never heard of it, didn't know what it did, read the back of it, and it talked about creating music. And that was one thing that we were like getting whatever beats we can get off of BearShare and Napster and whatever was available at the time. So we didn't have original beats. We had everybody else's beats. Got that game, and that game literally launched my production career.
Wow.
Without even knowing that's what it was going to be. It was on a PlayStation 1. And so that kind of made me start to get into a little bit more of the computer gear, because I had to figure out, how do I get these RCA cables from the PlayStation to record a clean signal into my computer?
Sure.
Because at first I was just using a Radio Shack mic and putting it up to the Zenith TV.
I was going to ask how you
were
were.
to 30.
Yeah.
and I would play my friends it, and they're like, "Oh, that sounds cool, man, but like, it sounds like it's on a telephone.
Sure.
No bass." And I was like, okay, I got to figure this out. But eventually I figured out you could put a sound card in the back of your PC, because I've always been PC guy, and figured out how to install it, put the music in there, and I was able to play stuff directly through it. So yeah, I sound like a boomer to probably some of the kids that are listening, but that's how I had to figure it out.
Yeah.
I don't want it by any means. We had to figure it out. Even with the rapping, we didn't have a studio per se. My buddy his pops had a boombox, and it literally was, take this cassette tape, put it over here, put this other cassette tape here. We're going to record here. And the way we do dub vocals is to switch them, run the playback, and then record over the tape with the new audio. And mind you, we're recording over whatever microphone or even headphone that we could afford, and we're making songs like that. First beat we ever rapped over was Art of Noise, Moments in Love.
Wow.
First one ever.
Crazy.
And that was like my favorite instrumental already of all time. Still is. But those are very minor decisions that are not so minor when you look at 20 years later.
Yeah.
How the ripple effect of those, right?
For sure. And the thought process, that's why I love breaking it down to the very beginning part, because like you had to get creative and figure out like, okay, well, I want to do this. How do I do this? So I can play this on this fucking PlayStation, but I can't record it. And then you go through that trial and error process, you know, it's like, it's the very humble beginnings that set you up for like actually having success in that 20-year, you know, when you're building that mindset, that's like, oh shit, whatever this is, I need to figure out the 1.0 version, the 2.0 version, the 3.0 version. I got feedback. It sucked. The 4.0 version. Now we're cooking 5, you know, and it's like, then it just becomes a fun game of like, well, now I'm just looking at how I can keep making improvements, you know?
Yeah. And I haven't stopped.
Yeah.
I haven't stopped. Here we are 20 something years. And I was talking to a buddy of mine, fantastic producer. Oh gosh, Leotis. And I've known him for some years, and we were talking today at he had an event today, and I was like, bro, I want to learn how to play an instrument, it's just something.
Yeah.
So I told him, I said, for the next 6-7 months, I'm going to find an instrument that really resonates with me and just develop on it. And so I've been actually doing it on my YouTube channel, where every week now what I'm going to do is buy a new instrument off of Amazon that they suggest, test it out, see kind of like if that same organic connection happens that happened with the PlayStation, because there was a chance that I wasn't even going to be producing. The buddy of mine we basically took our Christmas money and split it between us to buy this game, and he took it for the first few days, and he was like, I'm not doing this shit. And he's like, he said, you gonna be the producer. I was like, what do you mean? And I was like, I don't know anything about this. He said, man, you know about computers and shit. You'll be fine. I'm like, it's not the same. But thank God he did that, because one thing about me and technology, and I think we talked about it earlier, I would not be defeated. You will not beat me. I'm going to figure this out by any means. If I got to look at community boards from 1994, or whatever, wherever it's at, I will dig.
Yeah.
Even though they didn't exist, I will dig. I will find it. I'll figure it out.
Crazy, man. What was that game like? Just out of curiosity, did it have like samples? You remember it? Like, were you able to like actually sequence stuff, or is it literally just like you'd play sounds like by pressing the buttons?
So it gave you a huge collection of one shots,
Okay.
terrible sounding one shots with no. And mind you, I didn't really use it to its full capacity because now, as I revisit it as an adult, there's a fan of mine that sent it to me. A
No
big
way.
supporter of mine that sent that to me. He's Tone from Bakersfield. He's been somebody that supported me even through my hiatuses as a rapper. But he's just somebody who listens to the lyrics and he buys these very thoughtful gifts. Like when we talk about that 1,000 true fans,
Yeah.
I met that first through him.
Yeah.
And because of him, like he sent me the CD or the double disc, and so I put it back into my PlayStation. I'm just revisiting. I'm like, gosh, you can do so much, like trimming down the one shots to be a thinner kick, or shaping the kick, shaping the snares, and adding reverb. And these are things at the time that I was just like, give me the presets, give me the one shots, give me the vocal phrases, and I'll figure it out and just loop it together. Sure. Ironically, the GUI looks so much like FL Studio.
Wow.
The gray blocks, the pattern blocks, as we'll call them on FL Studio. There's so many things that mirror FL Studio, but it just kind of felt like it was a what do you call it, a premonition? Like it was a preview of things to come. And it, for sure, when I got into FL Studio, that was the wave, because for a long time I was like trying to fit in with the other producers who were supremely hardware. If you were FL Studio, they would look at you like you weren't a serious producer.
Sure.
And so I got my mom got a Roland Phantom, and had all the clip sounds on there from grinding and all that stuff. And that was my first, I guess, piece of hardware that I made beats on. It was so challenging, though.
Me too. That was my first keyboard.
First one?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, I got that. My dad took me to go get that from Guitar Center. Like I still have them in my storage unit. I have like the original, I don't know, maybe $100 M Audio, like 4-inch speakers or some shit like that. You know what I mean? Like the cheapest ones you could get.
Yeah.
I feel like I had some type of like USB level interface before I eventually upgraded. I can't remember what that was.
I had a Lexicon Omega.
I don't remember that.
That was like it was like a box that was blue and gray.
Okay.
But it was like basically like how the Focusrite is, but just turned it on its side.
Sure. Yeah. And
bulky thing.
I got that keyboard thinking like, you know, like anyone does, you walk into Guitar Center and you play around with some shit and you're like, oh man, this is so cool. And then I got it home and I was like, I don't fucking know what you are. I don't know what to do to you. You know what I mean? I don't know how to play this shit. I don't, you know, like only thing I can do is flip through the patches and play a couple things. And, you know, like when I first started, I was making beats off loops in GarageBand. And a friend of mine in school like was, you know, like, hey man, let's make a song. Like, you know, same kind of thing. Like I like to write, I like to rap. Like
right.
I like rap was like my first genre of music that I probably like fell into independently.
Okay.
So it was really like the thing where it was like, oh, this is like my music. You know what I mean? Like it wasn't like, oh, this is a radio thing or this is what my parents are listening to in the car. It was, I don't actually remember how it first made its way into my life, but that just became like a full blown addiction for me. And then like just realizing like, oh, there's loops and packs of like these Apple sounds that, you know, like you could string some shit together with if you don't know how to play, and, you know, came up with like started making instrumentals just based on that, and started recording. Yeah, you know, but it was actually really fun. But that keyboard collected dust for like a decade, and then when I met Polly, Polyester started playing that keyboard, and like then he'd start taking it to shows and stuff, and it had a new life because
you started seeing what he was doing with those.
Yeah.
Shout out to him, because I know his sound selection is beautiful. So I can only imagine what being exposed to that was like.
Yeah. Oh no, it was phenomenal. You know, but he ended up just basically like taking that keyboard, and that became his. You know, he'd take it to shows and his thing. So that's funny. That was your starting point too.
Yeah, and it was my starting point until I never forget a buddy of mine that I actually started making music with, my homie John. We were like work because he was the one that he was more fluent with the keys. He understood music theory and things like that, and that was stuff that I just didn't know. I was playing by ear. But I never forget, we were working on a beat and we were like sequencing it all within the keyboard, but we didn't have a memory disk or whatever you needed, the floppy. And I'd never forget I asked him, I said, "You want to go get something to eat?" And he said, "Yeah, for sure." And then he held the button
Oh.
and looked me right in the eye, like it was too late. And I was like, "It's still on." He said, and it's the funniest thing now, but at the time I was like, "Man, I'm not even hungry no more."
Yeah.
Bro.
Yeah.
I was working there for the last few hours, but it's funny you said the sounds. My mom, shout out to my mom. She bought me my first interface, which is that Lexicon Omega, and she also bought me my first DVD of sounds. And I'll never forget, I took some drums off of one of those DVDs, and the first beat that I made with my Lexicon Omega, and I had FL Studio and all that, was a sample of Tears for Fears. And I find it kind of funny. I find it kind of sad that dreams in which I'm dying are the best. Mad World. Yes. That was the first thing I ever sampled. And I remember it being so cold. It was in Carson, California in the middle of December. So cold that I was breathing and I could see my breath. But it did not matter because that's when I learned music can change the temperature of a room. So I think that's when the addiction started.
Yeah. Crazy, man. So you guys, like, pretty much is it like the two of you kind of starting, you and your buddy, that like got the beginnings of your career rolling? Like, was that like, hey, let's make a project? Or was it like, I'm going to start making beats and make it? And like, what was your initial approach to like, hey, this is really fun. Now I want to see this become a next step, you know?
Well, I think it's just every decision you make leads to another decision, right?
Sure.
So you get the game, and now you're spending more time with the game than your actual games, or the MTV Music Generator.
Yep.
Then you're starting to ask questions about, well, why is there a letter next to this one? Oh, that's the key. Okay, well, why don't people mix these sounds together? Oh, it's just unspoken rules in hip hop, unspoken rules of EDM. And that was something from the very beginning. I was like, I need to go on this journey alone. So my buddy was like, God bless Keaton, because he rapped on some atrocious beats through me trying to find myself. But it was like, he understood even at that younger, because he was a year older than me. He understood at that age, let him go.
Yeah.
Let him go. Let him figure it out. It's not going to always sound good, but one thing that you can't take away is that like he's a forerunner. He's tenacious. He's going to figure out how to get to the next step. And I did. And so it went from me recording, hoping everybody in the house will be quiet, recording on the TV, to actually recording straight input through the computer. And he was like, how did you learn how to do that? And it was like desperation, bro.
Yeah.
Like I want us to get somewhere. And I produced our entire projects. I learned very early from there. Still wasn't any good. I produced my own, but because I produced by myself first, it prepared me for when I met my buddy John, who I said went to King Drew Medical Center. And he is what really introduced me to weaving these ideas together and making music.
Cool.
Because I was just throwing a bunch of sounds together, hoping something would stick and, semi make me excited. And he came through, and I remember, I'll never forget, he played a piano solo, and I listened to the beat that we made together for probably 400 times the same day, because I was just like, it felt good to finally be a part of something musical.
Yeah.
And not just throwing a bunch of
Sounds
ideas. And I was trying to share it with everybody, and I should have known better.
Crazy, man. So what are you creating when you start to have that experience and it's like, oh, now I want to make a project?
Yeah, so we were making albums at the time.
Okay.
We're in Carson, California, and he and I it was almost like when you figure out how to do something in a video game and it feels like nobody else knows about it, and you got a special thing and you want to you want to see how far you can take it.
Yeah.
It's kind of like infinite mode, or what they call God mode on the game. That's how we felt making the music. And so we just kept making more. Eventually that led to my first show, which was at the Key Club.
Wow.
I got excited. Don't get excited yet though, Curtis. Walking to the Key Club, all I see are strobe lights going crazy. It's supposed to be one of those nights where you perform in front of an A&R who's looking for different labels. It was the typical thing, but I didn't know that. We're looking around and we're seeing all of these strobe lights. I'm like, yo, we're going to perform here. The first performance out the gate. And then they say, hip hop? We say, yeah. They say, oh yeah, go downstairs. I kid you not. We go downstairs. We check in at this makeshift table. And they tell us, oh yeah, you can go in there and sit down. We go inside the room, and people are literally, like workers are taking dishes back and forth through this bottom room and this stage, which is probably no bigger than this table right here. And we were like, oh, this is the first. Okay, this makes more sense. But that night, man, like we sold tickets and everything to do it, and that was our first show, and I got booed horrendously because it was one of those shows where you sold tickets so that your crowd could be the loudest and you could be the one that won the contest to be signed. And needless to say, we didn't win. There was a group called the Goonies. I'll never forget because through the boos, I heard, "Put the Goonies on, put the Goonies on," and I'm just like, fam, like I'm rapping over a piano right now.
Yeah.
Because my buddy was playing the keys. I was like, I'm rapping over piano. I see you. Like, you're not even the guy in the background. Like, I see you right now. But like, Rice was like, dog, you can talk to me now. He's yelling past me, but I needed that. I was a character building show. But that was my first one out the gate. And as time passed by, my buddy and I, we kind of went our separate ways and went into other ventures. But I just kept going. I tatted Curtis King on my shoulder, and I was like, this is for life. And it eventually led me to doing my own music. I was still in Carson, and then it led me on MySpace to working with an artist named Ben Grimm. And through Ben Grimm, started working with him, and he was the first artist that allowed me to really produce. And I was at a level where I felt like it's not what it used to be, but because my experience with John, I can really produce. I think I could produce for somebody. And we made some great music. He introduced me to Absol.
Wow.
And that's literally how the
beginnings of the trail started.
Happened.
Yeah.
And I'm crushing the story down for convenience, but it really was that easy, where me leaving a group situation in which I was like, I don't know what the future holds, me reaching out to a guy on MySpace who I felt like his music, he went by Ben Grimm at the time. His voice was like how when folks first heard I-20 with Disturbing the Peace, it's just like this bass. Like, it reminded me like a brass instrument, like a tuba. And I was like, it's such a crazy rap voice. I need to produce for this guy. And through him, he introduced me to Absol. And next thing I know, a few months later, I got this guy Absol coming to my grandmother's patio to record songs in my makeshift studio setup.
Crazy.
So, yeah,
and that's all. That was a couple connections deep into MySpace.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't hard, especially being in Carson, where I wasn't necessarily in the scene like that. I was more so the kid that had a bunch of friends from middle school that were still around the area, and I kept in touch with them, and they kind of weren't in the scene like that either. But all it takes is one artist to kind of give you the lay of the land.
Yeah, for sure.
And he for sure let me know, okay, this person over here is really dope. Rocket was a big name at that point in time. It was before he signed to Jeezy. Like, he was the biggest name at that point out there. Booyah Tribe was another name that was out there from Carson. And so Razkaz, obviously, but there was a lot of folks those were the folks everybody knew. But there were some names that were bubbling. Absol was another one that was like, yo, I'm telling you, he has like young Jay-Z energy. And I'm like, man, I got to see this. And literally the guy comes into my grandmother's patio, and I had never seen it to that point. I heard stories about Jay-Z, but he sat there, and I played a beat, and I couldn't tell if he was feeling it because he's still very mysterious. And I'm texting Grimm. I'm like, Grimm, is he cool? Like, he's like, bro, trust me, you're good. And I'm like, all right. So I'm supposed to be writing a verse to it as well. And he just stands up after just sitting in the chair. I was like, you need a paper and pad? He was like, no, I'm good. I was like, okay. 15 minutes later, he's like, I got it. He's like, you ready to record? And I'm like, record what? Like, where's your paper? Like, what do you this is before phones were verses and all that. I was like, what do you? And that man literally went up there and ran takes back with the patience of someone who remembers those lyrics. With the patience of somebody who wrote them down, I should say. And I saw that, and I was just blown away. I was like, this really is like the cadences, the breaks between his lyrics. To me, it felt like a lyricist interpretation of a Miles Davis solo.
Wow.
It's hard to predict where it's going. John Coltrane. It's hard to predict where it's going, but it all feels like it rests comfortably where it's going. Yeah. So it may go take a really dark turn, but you're like, something about this feels like it needed to be this way. That's how it was with his unpredictability. For the band to the band zone. Take time for the band to the down with the man. It's like, where is it going? But it all feels like it fits. I was exposed to that, and not only did it change my production, it changed the way I approach my rapping as well. I don't even think he knows that. So, yeah, seeing it. Yeah. Seeing it. That was the first time I was around, like, rappers. I posted my bro Keaton. The first time I was around rappers that I didn't know and grow up with. And man, the exposure changes everything.
Yeah, it really does.
Right.
I had that same when I moved here. I went to SAE. I had a similar experience of trying to find schools. Almost 20 years ago, like 16, 17 years ago, and just being like, damn, there's nothing. There's nothing out here. Like if you want to do music, I was looking at Savannah College of Art and Design. It was like $40,000 a year, and they were like, you don't even get to a studio until you're a junior. So it's like, go spend $80,000, 2 years of your life before you even walk in the door of the thing that you like. I knew I wanted to do music, so it was like I didn't exactly know what I wanted to do, but and so it was just like, oh shit, like no, and then it was just like, all right, I kind of fell into moving here and fell into SAE and met Glenn, and Glenn and I started doing the studio together, as like a hobby, hoping that something might happen. And he was working with you and I at the time, and I had a similar experience with Jonas, like coming into the studio the first time we met and just watching him just like put on a beat and he's just nodding out to it, and then all of a sudden he's just like, all right, cool, I got the verse, let's go. And I'm just like,
wait, what? How?
You remember all of that?
What do you do when you lose a line? Like, if I lose at a show, if I don't remember the first line, that verse is done. Good luck. Just repeat the whole thing again. I'll pull up my own lyrics on Rap Genius to figure out, like, let me, I
got to start this again.
I guess I'll just, come on, let's run it back. You know what? Y'all not ready yet. I need more noise. You can make up that excuse, right? But no, there's some folks who have a memory. They have a memory that is like, it's so clear to them.
Yeah.
My brain just doesn't operate like that. My brain is like, you do what you practice.
Yeah.
If you stray away too much, I
gone.
hope you've done enough practicing, because you're going to expose yourself.
Yeah.
So, and it's funny you said you and I too, because it might have been the same period of time when they won. I don't know if you remember, they won a contest on MTV.
Yeah. So that was like just before I met them.
Just before you met them. What's ironic about that is that I competed in that same contest because I saw them pop up on my page and I was following them. And I won some kind of a consolation prize where they put a music video that I shot on my little itty bitty digital camera. Wasn't meant for video, but it had video capabilities. I recorded my little sister. God bless my little sister. And the credits even say on the music video, because the video was called President Howard, and the credits say "Addicted to Words," directed by, and I edited in Movie Maker. And I the nerve of me, the audacity, I submitted it off to MTV for the contest, and I actually won some placement, some consolation prize. And they said, what you win is not only us, announcing that you won this consolation, but you're also going to be played on all the kind of local access cables. So that was like one of the biggest flexes. I was dating a girl at the time, and usually when the parents ask, what do you do for a living? And you're like, oh, I'm a rapper. It's like, oh God, here we go.
Yeah.
But I said I was a rapper, and then she said, "Ooh, turn on the Time Warner cable or whatever it was at the time." And I was like, "Oh yeah, turn it on." And literally, they pull it up, and just like you would pull up a movie, they pull up my music video. And I never forget, her dad looked at the video on the TV. And he looked at me. And he's like, "Man, you want something to eat?" I was like, "Yo, that's the ultimate flex. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what anybody say. I can lose this contest.
Yeah.
This moment right here makes me feel justified.
Worth it, dude. That's awesome."
So when you said you and I was like, man, that's around the same time. So you're like literally taking me down that road. Yeah.
Yeah, that was like my path into LA. I was working with those guys in much the same way. It was like, they would introduce me to all the different producers they were working with. And at the time, like, they had just won that contest. They had just had their first mixtape, The Fried Chicken and Watermelon, just came out. And Beautiful Day was going for them. Like, all this stuff was like starting to build. And Glenn was working with them at the school, and they were like, "Oh, we can't have you guys keep working here anymore." And I was just like, "Well, I have this little bedroom setup. If you guys dig it," and we just hit it off. And then literally, like, it just became like a frat house, for like 3 years.
Because the stuff that came out of that circle, man, is the stuff of legends. It's stuff that I remember seeing even before I was actually in the scene, seen from a distance, right? Even when I was. It's years later, but when I first started working with Ab, when he got signed to TDE, I remember, like, because I believe A Plus was a director.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
A Plus was also doing videos for Kendrick. So I remember just being like a fly on the wall, like watching this history happening. And I remember there was a video, I forget the name of the video, but he was showing videos inside that session. I'm just like, yo, what world am I living in right now? But even somebody being an artist at that time and recognizing how accessible people were, I still recognize that this was a classic time.
Yeah.
Because of what it represented, because of what people thought about when they thought about the West Coast. And there was like the New West era with like J-Rock and Glasses. And then there was this other era that was like an alternative energy that felt so LA.
Yeah.
Right. So that was a really good time period, though.
It really was, man. It really was a special, like, I got super lucky. I moved here in 2000, like, I think it was the end of 2000. No, it was the spring of 2008. Okay. So like I just moved right as all that stuff started to kind of get warm, you know.
Moved away, which is crazy.
And then just watched it all just fucking rocket ship.
Man.
You know, it was so cool. But yeah, I forgot the other guy. It was Fredo, and I can't remember his partner with A+. But man, I remember seeing those videos, and they made the Pulp Fiction video for you and I, and it had like the animation and all this shit. I was just like, yo,
like it was them. It was the Calmatic.
Yep, Cal was
first
killing
starting
it.
to kind of getting into his own. But I think that was just as important as the music is. These video directors were really representing the city in another authentic way, because at that time you really saw, when you thought about LA rap or you thought about just West Coast rap, you kind of saw a very similar presentation.
Yeah.
Right. It was just either like street culture. It was either this gang or this gang. You didn't really see this side of it, but they were doing videos that just made you feel like I had just moved to the Inland Empire from Carson in LA. I watched those videos and it made me miss home. I was like, that's really great work, but that's not just the work of the artists and the producers. That's also how the person behind the lens is shooting you. So
yeah,
that's something that was never lost on me. And I think it's part of the reason now today I'm so passionate about my videography in my work, because I'm recognizing, like, without the Spike Lees, without the Jordan Peels, without this John Singletons, certain stories just wouldn't be told in the way it needs to be told. And I feel like those directors were for sure capturing that.
Yeah.
They were working with everybody that was anybody.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Another one that came to mind was Tomas. I don't know if you remember Tomas Whitmore, but he was making amazing shit, dude. I'm trying to remember the first video. I want to say he did Beautiful Day, but I could be wrong. But man, I remember seeing some of his work and just being like, holy shit, dude. Like, how...
Where do these ideas come from?
Yeah,
but
and the execution,
but it's man, it works so hand in hand. And I think that because there's so much accessibility now, there's a lot of videos that you can tell when they were just pick up and shoot, not in a cool way. It was like pick up and shoot, and let's orchestrate it as if we organized it, and you lose that connection with it. Like I watch, random, like I watch Dom's grinding video, Dom Kennedy's grind, and I'm like, that feels like a house party that I've been to.
Yeah.
Or there's a few of them, man. I think it was Saran and Omari, and I want to say it was you and I as well. It was like a posse cut, and it was like literally, it was a one-shot video. I forget the name of the song. It was a one-shot video, and they were just like playing dominoes, and then they went to the living room and somebody was smoking. I forget the name of that, but like that needed to be captured the way that it did. Pac Div was another one that really set the standard, that for those of us that love lyricism, doesn't mean that we have to rap over just these East Coast beats. They were rapping over stuff that was just like that could be in somebody's like club playlist.
Yeah, for sure.
So it was a dope era.
So you start getting into, is it mostly production in that early stage when you're like, okay, I'm working with Ab, and now it's like I'm focusing primarily on production, or is it still I'm rapping this whole time? I'm rapping
as if it's a I wouldn't say a side hobby, but as if it was. So my 9 to 5 would be production in that world, and then my 5 to 9 would be, or my 5 until would be rapping.
Right.
I don't think that at that time I was anywhere near developed as an artist. I would say some cool things. I would pick up really fast in environments that I was in, because I was around a lot of lyricists, and so it was easy to really get around them and elevate my craft, but it still wasn't on the level. So there wasn't anybody asking to get Curtis King verses from, Ab Soul Elise and the TDE crew. So I did what I thought was the best decision, which is to continue pushing the production. Absol told me one time, he had just got signed to TD. I never forget. He pulled up to my house, and the announcement was out there, I think on MySpace. And he pulled up to my house, and he told me before he pulled up, he said, "Bro, make me a CD full of beats, and I'm gonna just float it around the studio." Because at this time, J-Rock's the biggest artist. Kendrick is, looking like he's next in line, but he's more so kind of doing like he's backing up J-Rock on these tours. But you knew K-Dot was up. You just knew he had something coming. And because of Ab, I didn't know this until later on, until I saw it in an interview. Shout out to Punch. That one of those beats on that CD, which is one of my terrible MTV Music Generator beats, was the first beat that Schoolboy Q rapped over there.
Wow.
So his demo, one of his demos, he said in an interview on Homegrown Radio, one of his demo rap verses was over a beat that had nothing but gunshots and snares and 808s. Because I was trying to get a J-Rock placement, and I was like, this is how I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna get a J-Rock placement. It was terrible, but Schoolboy Q rapped over it, killed it, and the rest is history. But yeah, it's I had to get into production if I wanted to get a foot, quote unquote, into the industry. This is when I still was really I felt very strongly about getting into the industry. I wanted to get signed. I wanted to, all these things that the younger artists that I'm like looking at them and I'm like, you have no idea.
Yeah.
That's when I was still on my mind. And so as a producer, I could get in more rooms than I could as a rapper. Matter of fact, me saying I was a rapper sometimes got me kicked out of rooms. So I learned very quickly, you just come with the beats, give them what they ask for, and you'll get in a lot more rooms quicker. It's like the guy who does videography, and then you find out 2 years later he's a producer.
Yeah.
There's a lot of those stories. So
yeah.
I kind of learned from watching the videographers how to kind of maneuver that one.
Sure.
So that was kind of what I ended up doing.
Nice. Yeah. And so what was that life like? You starting to pick up new gear and starting to figure out, I want to get this sound, I want to do this thing, so let me.
Yeah, well, I was in a place where because I started on the PlayStation, I didn't really ever get a chance to become a gearhead at that point. So I was really like, what can make this workflow even easier? What do I have that I don't need? Even like with the studio monitors and having like a real microphone, I didn't get that till years and years later because one, that Quiznos budget wasn't going to cut it.
Yeah.
Two, I didn't have an idea of what I was doing with the equipment. I had like a little omnidirectional mic, whatever my mom could afford, God bless her, and my Lexicon Omega. So it was like I learned how to maximize what I had. And so that meant make your beats on FL Studio, export them, and just hope something sticks.
Yeah.
And so my first big opportunity was when Absol chose the beat off that same CD that I made that he floated around the TDE studios. And it was one of the first collaborations on a project between him and Kendrick Lamar. And it was over my beat. And then the song was called Watch Your Lady. It was on Long Term, the first Long Term. And that was like a door into more opportunities. Because of that, eventually that built somewhat of a relationship with Glasses Malone, or even Ace Pun, who was his A&R at that point in time. But that was years and years later. It was almost like I got that placement. I worked with more of my local brethren, but it didn't really open up industry opportunities. It was more so like, oh, that's cool, because he was still up and coming. Absol was. But it wasn't until years later that I saw an email or an inquiry. Not even inquiries. It was a tweet from Ace Pun that was like, they're looking for beats for a Glasses Malone and Mac 10 album, and sent them to this email. So at that time, I had developed myself. I had moved out to IE, and I was more confident about my craft. I spent all this time around lyricists and learning what they want, what they like, what they don't like, what instruments they like. I started to really developing my knack for sampling. And that's what really helped me, because I wasn't, like I said, music theory based. Learning how to sample was the best decision I ever made, because then after that, it was just fluid. I just had a better workflow. Fast forward to 2010, I think it was, I sent beats to that email. And I remember going to church and coming back home from church, and I saw an email that said, hey, I think we're choosing one of these beats. And literally they chose one of those beats, and it was my first paid placement. I had never been paid for anything, TDE related. It was more so, I want to do whatever I can to assist Ab in this stage because he looked out for me.
Sure.
And so with that one, I never forget. I got my $500 check, and I was so proud of that.
Hell yeah.
And
it's a big deal.
It's a big deal. And then, then I was introduced to what the industry could be, right?
Yeah.
Not anything bad. I mean, I wouldn't say it's anybody's fault, but I remember that first check, I needed that like so bad because financially, this is when the housing crisis occurred in 2009. My mother was, she had quit her job because a bunch of stuff happened. My grandparents passed away. We sold the house in Carson, moved to Rancho. We were starting all over again. But then a housing crisis happened. A little bit of inflation happened. And just life just became so much of a challenge. I needed that money.
Yeah.
And so they finally sent it after, I went and signed some paperwork. I finally got my check signed off by Glass. So I actually picked it up. And I went to the check cashing place around the area and saw that they spelled my name, Curtis King. And that's not my real name.
Yeah.
So I couldn't cash the check.
Oh.
So I ended up having to call back. It just became a few months before I actually got that money. By the time I got the money, we were already evicted.
Yeah.
And had to move away.
Wow.
I had a PR at the time that, when you first get your money, you start making promises about like, oh, okay. I had a manager that was a PR as well. And I was like, okay, I'm going to get you when I get my placement from this. And it was my first foray, my first introduction to what this could be. It's funny because I had a buddy of mine that actually produced on the same project, and he called, and I called him. I said, "Bro, how much you get paid?" He said, "We got paid." I was like, "Oh, welcome to the industry, bro.
Yeah.
If you don't know any better, it's still your fault."
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. Damn, that's crazy though, man. So that hits right at like the perfect storm of life just being total shit.
Yeah.
And you're riding through that, and you get your placement, and you eventually get sorted, and
it was the reality that I kept seeing in front of my face, bro. It was like every time that I aggressively pursued the industry, I felt like, because I'm a believer, I felt like God showed me something about my peers, showed me something about the people that I looked up to that showed me the real.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people are ushered into this industry and they're kind of like, their eyes are covered. They'll see some things, but they're like, it can't always be like this. And they go into other circles and they're like, okay, in this circle, it can't be this.
Yeah.
And then they see it's that and they're like, okay, they're just in denial until eventually it's too late. They're already signed into a deal and they look back and they're like, it really was like that the whole way through. You just have to find your peace with it. That's something where the times that I started to aggressively pursue, it was always something that happened. It's like, what is this about? Or I would always see somebody show a side of them that when I told other people, they were like, I've never seen them act like that. I was like, maybe it's me then. Come to find out though, like, I feel like it was always pushing me in the direction that I'm in today, which is to embrace fully my independence. I just didn't know that then.
Sure.
I just thought that this was what they were talking about paying your dues, and this is what it was. But
I mean, it's also like different times, we're much better tooled to approach the industry as independent artists versus like that was the theory. That was like probably 30 years of music was all based on pay your dues.
Yeah.
You got to do it this way. Eventually you might catch a break,
Right.
Now there's like this whole other world that exists where it's like, oh, actually, if you're strategic, you can really use all these tools that are out here and build a career and find financial stability, which is like the number one goal when you're first getting to music,
It took a buddy of mine telling me something that I'd never even thought about, but he was like, he wasn't even involved in hip hop, but he was like, when you talk about this theory in hip hop about paying dues, does anybody ever bring up how, you invest in yourself? Does anybody ever bring up what's a bad investment? And I didn't have an answer for him. I was like, I had never heard anybody talk about, I mean, that's more commonplace now. At the time, it was like everything that you were paying your dues, no matter how much money you lost, oh no, you're paying your dues.
Yeah.
The idea and the concept of a bad investment wasn't at least a mainstream thought in most artists that 100%. I was around. And so when he said that, I felt like an idiot because I was like, okay, yeah. So maybe some of this paying my dues is not all about just getting beat up voluntarily. Maybe some of this is about learning your lesson and knowing where not to go again.
Yeah.
Or how to not approach that or how to protect yourself. And so it took a lot of hard knocks, a lot of falling on my ass to really understand, like, this is the nature of this business. I don't demonize it. I just say it is what it is.
Yeah.
And I have a choice of when I go there, if you go without protection, you know what's gonna happen. So
Yeah.
it's kind of how I had to come to grips with it.
Yeah, for sure. So what was the, like, I guess, when did you start with your rap career, and like, what was the process like with, okay, I've now recorded my album and I want to put this out into the world?
Right. Well, I had put out probably 5 or 6. I called them mixtapes because mixtapes were just, that was the big surge at that time. That was
Sure.
like the G Unit era and all that.
Totally.
Those mixtapes were a collection of beats that I produced, a collection of beats I found on BearShare and LimeWire and all that stuff. And I would just literally, I was going to Cerritos College at the time. I would just go up to the college and just pass them out.
Like you making CDs and pass them out?
CDRs.
Yeah.
And I'm literally designing the cover art in what is it?
Like Paint or something?
MS Paint. Yes, sir. MS Paint. MS Paint. This is before thankful for sites like Canva now, but MS Paint, I was designing that, and I was like hand drawing these things and just printing them out on CDRs while I'm sitting up here with the movie on loop, usually like Purple Rain by Prince, just watching the movies and just stacking them up and distributing my music way before it was, I guess, it was ready. And it wasn't until I started to really understand, I guess, more of the business of it and really understand, okay, here's the parts where I'm disconnected with people. And I started to connect with artists in the IE. Did I really start making albums that I was really proud of? The first one that I made, and was actually before I met them, was called Snick at Night. That was the first album that really did well in a local area, where I basically took all these Nickelodeon shows, all these nostalgic shows that I grew up on, and I sampled them. I had Doug, I had Ren and Stimpy, I had all these different themes, and I just sampled them and I rapped over them. And I did what was the complete opposite of what was expected of a West Coast artist at the time. I just decided to just be me. And that thing spread like wildfire.
Cool.
Through all the blogs, and that was an era of blogs. It was just all over. And that project started to get me booked for a lot of shows. That project eventually led me into signing my first independent deal with a label called Black Cloud Music from the Inland Empire. And so those are probably the first project. That one and another one called Storm on Mars, where I guess that you've had on here, TaeBeast. I forgot about that whole era. There was an era where before I moved out to the IE, I was part of his label. Him and Starlab had a label in Inglewood called Rockstar ENT.
Wow.
And I was a part of that. And that was my boss. TaeBeast was my boss, my mentor. But he would never quite give me the whole answer. He wanted me to figure it out, right?
Yep.
But that 2 or 3 years that I was there, so let me take that back. That 2 or 3 years that I was there, I did a project called Notorious Scholars that I was supremely proud of.
Production and rapping?
Mostly rapping,
Okay.
a little bit of production, but I had TaeBeast.
Yeah.
I had TaeBeast.
Yeah.
I had TaeBeast before the world knew him as TaeBeast. And I'm like, I just listened to his beats and I was like, that's what I wanted to sound like. Why doesn't it sound like this? I've been producing the wrong way the whole time. And he would show me stuff, and you know, Tay's so humble. Like, he would show me stuff in his apartment, and he would just be like, he'd have like a little like celery tray. He'd just be casually eating. I'm like, how can you eat knowing you make stuff like this? I would just goosebumps all over it. And I remember I pull up on him. His neighbor was Sky Hutch. Like, it was just like, that was my circle. And even the homie Starlab, like, he had such great beats, but it was just this in-house situation. So that was the first, there was never any paperwork, but that was like the first label that I was a part of. And that was like college for me as an artist.
For sure.
That's where I started to learn, like, TaeBeast was really producing me. He was telling me, I know you like to be animated with your voice, but try it in pockets here. Do it here. And so he had a project called Champions, where I was just surrounded by so many amazing artists and producers. I had to step it up the same way Ab-Soul had me step it up from being in their presence. And between those two and then finally getting out to the IE, that's when I finally started making projects on my own that I was like, they were greatly curated because of my experience with Tay.
Amazing, dude.
Man, that's my guy.
Yeah, he is the best. And I mean, Sky is an amazing, what a great duo to be raised by, essentially,
Right.
in that early,
Like, even as we're talking right now, a buddy of mine brought this up to me months ago, and I was like, it dawned on me, like, this is not normal.
Yeah.
Like 95% of artists and producers who a producer from North Dakota or from Montana or from Seattle, like they have their circles and people that they respect, but it's like that's so regular for us.
Yeah.
It's easy to forget how rare that is.
Yeah. 100%.
Like what? What do you mean your first projects were produced by Tay and Scott? And it wasn't them in a stage where they were like embarrassed of the work. They were making stuff that still eats up anything that you're hearing now. And I'm like, I don't know. I rapped on one of the first, I shouldn't say one of the first, but one of the early Weird People beats. That's the collaborations between Tay and Sky. And it's like, the fact that I can say that sometimes it blows me away. But those are my brothers.
It's a big brick for history, you know. It's pretty amazing to have that, you know.
Yeah, abundance for sure. Because I did not take it for granted when I was in a room. The production was light years ahead of where I was as an artist, but it also elevated me as an artist.
Yeah, it's the best way to learn.
I had to get it. Yeah.
Being around people who are just significantly, or at least you feel significantly more talented than you are,
Sure.
you know, and it's just like, oh shit, I gotta get knees up right now, you know, like this is like
I can't play around.
Yeah, I can't be embarrassed in this.
I want to
fucking,
rap on this beat. I cannot be the guy that they throw in a third verse because you couldn't get it together. Like I could not be that guy. I was like, no, whatever I need to change, whatever I need to develop, I'll grow at a lightning speed. And that environment literally made me even more of a gym rat than I already was. And I had a studio at home, but going into that one where somebody was actually teaching me how to do harmonies, teaching me how to mix my voice, right? Telling me, just showing me things that maybe I wasn't ready for because I wasn't an engineer at that time, but exposing me to it to where there's things that I still carry with me today. Like, you know, being in that situation, absolutely. I couldn't skip over that. That's a very important part of the story for sure.
Amazing, dude. So you're making these albums and you're starting with making CDs, which you're designing, and then you're tapping into, were you posting stuff on MySpace? Or was it kind of like that was the original promotion vehicle?
Yeah. So that was a big one for me because MySpace forced you to learn HTML coding, right? That's to a certain degree. Like you had to know
if you wanted to customize,
you wanted to customize it, you need to know something. And I was a customizer. Actually, my first money in rap wasn't selling a CD. It wasn't anything else that was like the cool way. My first money that I made in hip hop and rap was me selling customized MySpace pages.
Wow.
I was the guy that was like, I'll customize your MySpace page for $50.
Sure.
And I'll never forget it. I wasn't a graphic designer by trade. I just knew my way around MS Paint.
Yeah.
And so I figured it out, sent it to him. The guy loved it, sent me my money. And I was like, yo, I made my first rap money, but it wasn't from anything else except for that. But yeah, man, that being in an experience, being able to start putting out projects, I needed to distribute them. And that's after I went and got my marketing certificate from Orange Coast. And that really kind of focused me once again that business can be an art form the same way that music is an art form.
Totally.
And the way when I started to leverage that in the way that I did, it made it so much more enjoyable. Then I started to see, okay, I have a passion for campaigns, rollouts, marketing, but I have a passion for finding out what makes a massive amount of people want to look in the direction of something or what makes them connected to one another, which led me to making a project called Snick at Night, like I talked about, which are just a collection of like these nostalgic themes. And what I started to see when I did shows, people who weren't paying attention before started to pay attention because they're like, wait a minute, I know that's not Doug, or I know that's not, and they're hearing me rap and it's like, oh, I'm going to give it a chance. That project is what started to give me, like I said, my first shows with, shout out to Noah James and Lisa J. They had a thing called The Common Ground. They had a show in Riverside called The Common Ground. And those projects ended up getting me booked for my first shows.
Nice.
So, yeah.
And so you're just starting down the road. You're starting to see, cool, I'm getting booked for shows. This project's working. The theme was working. The marketing plan is working. And you're working with the label that's out there.
Working with the label out there. And it was a label that was ran by a producer and artist named Jinx. Noah was signed to that label. It was known in the area to be like a staple of the IE, mostly like independent underground hip hop, lyricist based hip hop. And that was just the space that I was in. I felt myself kind of pushing away from making stuff that was radio friendly or things like, cause I was trying to find my way. I even went through a reggaeton era where
Wow.
I work with the artist that was like, he was really making his runs at that time when like Daddy Yankee and everybody was hot, and it was like, if you find a way to get in here, there could be an opportunity for you. And I take that back. He was the one that actually got me booked for my first show, was because we did a collaboration reggaeton song.
Wow.
And I didn't know a lick of Spanish. All I knew was how to rap over the beat and he helped me produce it. I made the beat, and that got me my first shows. But coming back over to the Noah James and the label situation, that was where I could take all the things that I learned scattered from all these different experiences. Like I performed at the Nicaraguan Fest. They didn't know who I was. I looked like Pitbull. I had a bald head. They were telling me things in different languages. I was like, But fast forward, like Noah and Black Cloud and Jinx, they really helped me to start to mold this Curtis King brand and figure out, like, who are you really?
Sure.
Is it the guy that wants to be in this scene, or is it just the guy that wants to tell his story? And what is that story? So that's where I kind of really started to tighten up as an artist, for sure.
Amazing, dude. And so you're constantly on the refining growth, you know, new information and leveling up. And is it just like years of grind at that point in time? Like you kind of hit that phase of just like, I'm just doing this all head down, rinse and repeat, make more beats, make more songs, put them online. Does it start to be like
mundane?
Yeah.
yeah. It got to a point where I was like, this can't be how long a career really is. Like, how long until we quote unquote make it?
Yeah.
And it's a mindset that I think a lot of people share, even more so now at a younger age than I did. Mind you, I'm probably like late 20s, early 30s at this point, mid to late 20s. And so there wasn't as much urgency as there is now on a 17-year-old on IG or TikTok to blow up, because they see everybody around them that's blowing, quote unquote, blowing up, or whatever that means. I wish I would have understood at that time how much time this career actually is, if you're lucky.
Yeah.
Right. If you have the patience for it, if you don't burn yourself out making unwise business decisions that make you just a shell of yourself. Because I saw it. I saw artists that came in, surpassed me, took off, and then came flying down just as fast. And then when you talk to them, they got this look in their eyes like, don't go in there, bro.
Yeah.
It's not worth it. I've seen that more than a few times. And I've just been blessed at that point to be around for so long. But there still was a conversation of like, yo, when is this going to crack off? And my buddy Noah campaigned to get on Merz's festival called Paid Dues, which was like, it was the biggest independent hip hop festival in the world. And he got on, but because he campaigned and went to go meet Merz, I met Merz. And in meeting Merz, first thing he told me was, oh, Curtis King? Okay, you produce for Absol? Yeah. Here's my email. Send me some beats. First thing he told me.
Wow.
I'm like, okay. I had known him from Living Legends. I was familiar. And so I sent him beats, and he didn't really like anything there. And so it took about a year later, because I couldn't even tell if he even liked me. I was like, anytime I crossed paths with him, he was like very short. He was like, hi, like just that. And I was like, oh God. I'm up, at this time I rebranded. I got a flat top with the blonde in it. I look like Sinbad. I'm making songs called Sinbad. Shit.
My bad.
All good.
Let me make sure that didn't. Yep. Nope. Oh, weird. It like froze it, but then we're still going. Okay. I've never had a FaceTime call come in while trying to do this, so that's the first.
Worries.
My bad.
You're
so
all good.
rebranding, got the
so
flat top going blonde.
Part of the Black Cloud experience was me becoming comfortable with another group of people that said it was okay to be me. Almost like they gave me permission to be me. Because at the time I was, like I said, very insecure about launching on my ideas. And so the first thing was, I don't have the money for Supreme. I don't have the money for all the brands that are like the it brands at the time.
Sure.
I'm just going to go to the thrift store and find like the ugliest 90s shirt, because I was a big 90s sitcom, the Martins, the Fresh Prince, the Wayans Brothers. That was my era of comedy and TV. And so I was like, I want to start dressing like them. Then I got the flat top, and I was like, wow, I look like how I look like as a kid. I said, I want to go a little further. Somebody said, man, you like Sinbad. I said, not yet. I got a little blonde piece of my hair. I look just like Sinbad. And so that was my thing. I became like Baby Sinbad was my like moniker. And that's what really made people, it made it so easy for them to remember who I am. Just like the homie Verbs has a red beanie anywhere he goes.
Yeah.
The branding just makes it like, that's what it was for me, is the flat top was easy to recognize. And it actually opened up, weird enough, opened up a lot of doors for people who remember me. But in doing that, that also got me on the radar of Murs, because a year after my buddy campaigned and got on Paid Dues, I performed with him on the stage. I campaigned. And that campaign was, I think, a 97-day campaign. And finally, I got a call from Murs himself, and he was like, "You're on Paid Dues." Did Paid Dues a couple years later, or a year later. He asked me to open up for him at the House of Blues Anaheim. Did that, killed it, had an amazing show. Then he comes to us, Black Cloud, with the proposal to go on tour with him. 2-month tour. I think maybe 30 states. We just had to finance it ourselves. Like, we really had to get out there and do this independent, like, really have to figure it out.
Yep.
And so we did. And we got a van and we drove around the U.S. following Murs on his tour. And that was like the first, like, quote unquote break.
Yeah.
Was being able to go on that 2-month tour with Murs and really learn what it's like to be a touring musician, touring artist.
What was that experience like?
I miss my toilet. I miss my clothes. I miss my bed, my pillow. It was amazing in that every night was a dopamine spike, because you're somewhere you've never been. Every room, every street you walk to is something you've never experienced before. I know you can make an argument for that at home, but it's home still. Yeah. There, it was just like every night was something different. And so we met a lot of interesting characters along the way. We were actually on tour with Murs. We were the openers. There's an artist from Minneapolis, or from Minnesota, named Prof, and then Fashawn from the Bay. And so that was the tour. And like, we just learned, like School of Hard Knocks, once again, we learned from them about what does it mean to really throw a show. And like that was crazy experience. Whenever we told people about the tour, like even like we were talking to, it was either Razcast or he was, who was it that we talked to? Chino XL. We told him that we were on there for 2 months. He said, 2 months? That's your first tour? He said, that's unheard of. Yeah. We didn't know. We just thought this is what touring was. But
that's big.
Yeah, bro. Like, we went out there, man. We didn't really have a whole lot of experience or money, and there were times where we just had to learn the hard way. We thought we could like shack up in hotels and get away with it. And the first day we did that, the hotel owner chased us out, or the motel owner chased us out with a phone camera, and was like, "You can't do that." Like, okay, we got to figure this out. But it grew us up. Like, I have a tattoo where it's the roads through the concrete, and it says "Road to Paid Dues." Like, that tour forced me to do a lot of growing up and a lot of maturing. And I came back home feeling like a new man. I came back home feeling like home was just not as big as I thought it was. Yeah. The city's not as big as I thought it was. I feel like so much could be done. And so much did get done after that. Yeah.
What was that next chapter like? You come back, you kind of have a life-changing experience in a way. You get fresh perspective on, damn, my city, my world's not as big as I thought it was when I left. Yeah. You know, you get that dopamine, like you said. You're exploring new places. You're performing, you know.
Yeah. It re-energized me, man. It re-energized me because I recognized that I had a product that works all over the U.S.
Cool.
And not in theory.
Yeah.
Like, and seeing people like, and people I never would have expected. Like, we performed at Atlanta at I forget the name of the venue. We performed at Atlanta, and this big white guy in the back, he has like a long beard, right? He looks like one of the I wouldn't say Siskel and Ebert, like a movie critic. But like, he's not even there for hip hop. And he like gets next to me and he's like, "Yo, that Sinbad song's fucking badass, bro." And I'm just like, "This is the first time hearing it?" He's like, "Hell no, bro. I watched the video, left a comment, everything." And I'm like, what I thought I knew, I didn't know. Yeah. And so in going to that experience, I came back home with like, I was more social because I met so many different people. But just like most things, when you get that high, you got to come back down. And the next few years was a lot of turmoil because I ended up leaving the label. That's something else touring gives you too, is when you're spending all that time with anybody, it gives you clarity on yourself, on them, and them likewise. And I think a lot of us kind of figured out we wanted to do so much, but we felt like where we were at just wasn't enough space to do it. At least that's how I felt. I want to speak for myself.
Sure.
And so I left, and a lot of doors closed when I did leave, and so I had to kind of rebrand and rebuild myself again. Did that. Ended up getting managed by a manager from out here that I met through my homegrown family named Salas. And Salas opened up a lot of opportunities back in the industry, because then I was like, okay, my independent family over here is a little bit undecided where we're at with things, so I got to figure out what's my next move. And the industry just felt like maybe it is time. Maybe I'm smarter. Maybe it's different. And Salas and his team were just aligning me with people. DJ Head was DJing for me for some time, and he brought me into rooms that otherwise I wouldn't be in those rooms. And I learned so much in a short period of time. But the most important thing I learned was that this wasn't for me. It just wasn't for me.
Yeah.
Even at that age, even with the experience of touring, I said, this isn't for me. It's a different world in which you have to be okay with, not saying that they were, but you have to be okay with the cap.
Yeah.
You have to understand that if you say certain things, it may have been to be helpful, but it can actually get you blackballed in certain rooms. You have to understand that even if you do know more, sometimes it's important for you not to say more, because somebody may feel like you're coming after their position. Little nuances that I just could not pick up until I left, and I recognized, damn, that's why they stopped answering the phone. But it's things that I was like, damn, okay, that exists. I have to wait whenever I have a payment situation. I have to wait for this person to talk to Karen in financing, and they don't come back from their vacation until next week. And then I have to wait for this person to okay it. And I was like, dude, I cannot operate like this. That was another thing. I wasn't making money like I needed to make. So I took a chance when things got financially the worst. And my ex now, but my girl at the time, she had a vehicle, and it shut down. And mind you, like, I wasn't making any money from my projects. It was just hell at that point. And something made me reach out to a guy named Awesome, who I had known for some years, who was selling beats online. And I reached out to him, and he laid it out. This is what the business is. I made more money in the first 3 months than I had made my entire duration as an artist and producer, touring, all that stuff. Made more and selling beats online, and the number kept going up every single month. And I was like, yo, what is this?
Yeah.
I'm licensing my beats to independent artists. And it's like, damn, these independent artists are paying me faster than these artists that have budgets, that have labels behind them. Like, but it still didn't dawn on me to pour my energy into them. It was more so like, well, it's kind of a means. It sounds terrible, but it's a means to get to finance where I want to get at.
Sure.
But they literally kept the lights on. Those independent artists that had no shame or no politics behind paying me, they paid me. And I'm telling you, bro, like, my first 6-figure year came from selling beats online. Even then, it didn't dawn on me like, could this be a business, until me doing that took my ex and our family dynamic from renting somebody's bedroom that we couldn't even afford, to staying with a friend, and then eventually having a house in Rialto, which for me was like unheard of. I'd always been living with somebody in my music career, but that came from selling beats online. And in doing that, changed my life, bro. It literally changed my life in a way that I would have had to do a lot more in the industry for it to work that way or that quickly.
Sure.
So yeah, that's huge.
Yeah, that's amazing, man. And did you at that point, when you see that start to work, is that something you did start to invest in, or it was still just kind of like a side hustle? Okay.
I was ashamed, bro. Like, I was ashamed to sell my beats, because here I was jumping in these studio sessions, and it sounds ridiculous now, but I'm jumping in these studio sessions, and how can I tell them that I want a rack for this beat if they can go get it and license it for $30 from this website?
Yeah.
It was almost like a unspoken rule. You don't bring that up. For a time period, I was part of the collective League of Stars. I was like an unknown producer within that group. I was known for being Curtis King, but in that shape, if I wasn't making function records or stuff for like Problem, it just wasn't going to work out. And I was making sample based stuff, but because of that time period, like I learned so much about who I was. But that was a no. They were like, like Pun would tell me, like, bro, I can't negotiate on your behalf to get bigger splits or bigger paydays for you because you got this website over here, so you can't really promote it.
Yeah.
So kind of like subconsciously, I would push it off to the side, even though it was making me more money than anything else in my life. It was like, yeah, it's making me money, but I can't really talk about it. So imagine how challenging it was for the marketing and me to want to talk about it.
Yeah.
But I couldn't because it was kind of a handicap for me or hurting me in the industry. And then just got to a point where the money just started getting so good and I got so comfortable with that, it just didn't feel as impelling to do industry stuff.
Sure.
And, long story short, because there's obviously a lot of stuff that goes into it, but I eventually ended up just telling my manager, and I regret the way that I did it. I talked to him and let him know about that, but I regretted the way that I did it, but I just basically told him, I'm done. I don't want to do this anymore. I had a PR at the time, and she was amazing at what she did, but she was amazing because she was precise and she was detailed. And at the time, I was like, I'm making good money, and my life is just not at a place where I want to be disciplined within the industry. I was losing money doing these events or doing these pop-ups, driving to LA from Rialto, but I didn't mind because I was making a lot of money. But I was like, energetically, I'm just not in. It's just my heart's not in this. I can't do the showing up to look cool, like the stuff that you see like in events for LA, showing up at the shoe events and just kind of like standing around and like shaking hands. Oh, okay, I see what you're doing, bro. Let's build. I couldn't do that anymore. It just made me fucking sick to my stomach.
Sure.
And it's not against the people. It's just that's just how it is. And when you're not in that industry, it a lot of the stuff doesn't make any sense. When you're in it, you're in it. But when I transitioned and went back home and recognized that I have to really do this on my own again, it produced another great moment in that the first project I made, because I made a project with Salas as my manager called Raging Waters, and it did really well. Hip Hop DX called it one of the top 25 albums of the year. But that was the time that I was like, I need to pivot. And it wasn't because I was desperate or anything else except for the fact that I read a book called The Go-Giver. In Go-Giver, they talk about the power of giving value and what value actually means. At that point, that was just a word for me that meant go to McDonald's and you hit the value meal. I didn't really understand what it meant to give value and the different ways that shapes up. But I read that book and it taught me about this, basically that the secret to living is giving. And in learning from that book, and I started listening to a podcast around the same time called Entrepreneurs on Fire by John Lee Dumas. And he would basically interview these successful entrepreneurs, millionaires, and he would ask them one question every single episode. What are your streams of revenue? Every single one of them talked about teaching or something that gave as part of one of their revenues. And I was like, you just don't hear that about that in hip hop.
Yeah.
They may do it, but once again, it's beating home in my head that the secret to living is giving. Around that same time, I go to a Tony Robbins event. It's almost like life is just, not almost like I know that life is always happening for you and not to you. I went to Tony Robbins event. I got invited by a gentleman that owned a gym in my local area in Rialto. One of the best decisions I ever made. I went to that event, 3-day event, learned so much about my mind and my body, walked on hot coals, fire, came home, I was on fire, and I released a project called Jubilee Year. And it went number 4 on the iTunes hip hop charts. I had never had a project. I had a project called Aticophobia, which was my debut album with Black Cloud that went number 40. This one went number 4.
Wow.
And it was like, I went all of these different lanes, all these different places trying to get to this destination. And I could have just done this already right where I was at. I was working with my buddy, Oh Gosh Leotis. I brought his name up earlier. And he literally just produced the whole thing. He mixed it, and he was like, just focus on rapping. Because at that time, I was doing YouTube to pivot, all these different things.
Sure.
And, but that decision to give is what brought me into the YouTube space. It's what brought me into doing things as an independent artist my way, trying some things out. And a lot of it has brought me my biggest success stories. I'm no longer just the guy who produced for Ab Soul and Kendrick. To a lot of people, they only know me from my YouTube space. They only know me for the projects and things that I've done afterwards. But it's a blessing to have as many lives as I've had in this.
100%. Yeah, 100%, man. So cool.
Yeah.
So you're going through that process. You learn that there's, alternate ways of forging a career.
Yeah.
You're starting to see all the different ways you burn out, things that become exciting. You're going through the roller coasters of all this stuff. You have a project that hits number 4 on iTunes. And what's the feeling like at that point? Like, is it more inspiration to keep going? Is it kind of like, oh, I've checked the box,
Right. It was a little bit of box checking, but it wasn't. It was a great feeling that didn't last long.
Sure.
And I didn't recognize that just is a part of that's a part of the independent experience that I wasn't ready for. I was always used to when you accomplish something, there was a release party, there was people celebrating with you. These things happen very quietly. Like, I had the number 4 album, and I think my mom was ironing or something. She was living with me at the time. She ironed her teeth, and it was like, oh, that's really good. I'm proud of you. And it was like, I don't know if she understood what that was.
Yeah.
But it was like, as loud as it was on the internet, it was very quiet in the household. And so, not that folks weren't proud, it's just that it just, is what it is. It's kind of a moment. That helped me to understand that a lot of the things that I'm going to accomplish is going to be something that'll be appreciated a lot later than I was expecting.
Sure.
But I found peace in that. And even now recently, like, I don't want to fast forward too much, 'cause I know we're moving our way up there, but a project I just released called DIY2, it was the first time I went number 1 on the hip-hop iTunes charts. And even that, I was like prepared for it to just be a moment. I was like, but one got to be different. A part of my brain was like, no, one's got to be different. It's got to be. And it was like, no. Like, Oh Gosh was there literally helping me edit a video he had shot for me that same day for the project. My wife was getting ready to go to bed. She's like, oh, I'm so proud of you. And then my son, everybody went to bed, and then life went on. And so it dawned on me that you have to be the one that celebrates yourself. I didn't get a bunch of phone calls, text messages. It was just like, this is what you're supposed to do. So I clock in, and that's what I do. But yeah, that literally started off by 2016. I would say is what literally started off where things are at right now. When I started to see my YouTube revenue going up, when I started to see the opportunities that specifically I as a producer could have, it launched an opportunity to write a book, plugins, sound packs, all these good things that come along with the journey. But those are the very crucial decisions to bet it all on myself when there's literally no blueprint of how I'm going to do it myself.
Yeah. It's back to like having the MTV video game and figuring out how to hook up the, sound card and
full circle, man.
Yeah.
Yeah. Full circle. But I it's something I'm supremely grateful for, because had I not gone through that, I would understand what happens to so many artists who come in here and they just disappear off the face of the earth and they don't want any parts of it. I get it. This is a lot to do. This is a lot, and it's even more now. And it sounds crazy when I tell people this, but I'm like, as much work as we have to do as independent artists and producers now, this is still the easiest time it's ever going to be.
Yeah.
Because in the same way 10 years ago, you didn't have to worry about being a quote unquote content creator. And even in that space, like when I pivoted from that project, with the success it had and Hip Hop DX talking about it the way that they did, that was the time I should have been focusing on me the most. But that's when it clicked to me. The secret to living is given. I can give my way to whatever I want to achieve. And that's the one thing that I wasn't doing. Maybe that's why I'm hitting all these roadblocks. So I bet it all on that idea and that concept, and that literally changed my life. But I had to go through those times to really, really move with confidence into every situation that comes up to me. I don't really get too high on highs, too low on lows. I stay pretty damn stoic. But because I've seen so much of that, it's just like, it's part of the process.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally get that. I feel like I have that same kind of energy with like just the stoic nature of like things go really high, things go really low, and you just kind of experience it and keep trucking through it. You know what I mean? You find your moments or your celebrations or your little things that hit, and you generally like kind of quietly celebrating those things more or less by yourself. You know what I mean? And it's just like, holy shit, like I can't believe this thing just happened. And, you know, it wasn't exactly how I saw it going, but at the end of the day, like, it it was still something that I sought out and accomplished, and I'm proud of. And
yeah, and then people don't even let you enjoy it either, because before I could even like let the dust settle, then the skepticism plays in, because it's always funny to me that we hear all these stories, very public stories, about folks who are paying their way through radio, paying their way through the industry. And I got this idea to make a bundle for my album for pre-orders, because I recognized that there was an opportunity from my other I had 2 projects that went number 4, Jubilee Year and Somersault. And I recognized that if an artist releases on a off release day, a soft day for the music industry, which is usually on Fridays, which are the strongest days, obviously, their official release date, there's an opportunity to chart. If you can stack up the pre-orders, they're like rollover minutes. They roll over into the first day sales of that. It's so crazy to me that in understanding how, like, you watch, like, Tyler had bundles with his project and it did really, really well because people want more than just the music. I said, you know what? What do I have that is unique that not every artist, maybe any artist, can present? I said, you know what? For a $5.99 pre-order of my projects, DIY, I did this for all projects. If you're an artist, I'll give you a beat. If you're a producer, I'll give you access to a course, a plug-in if you want it. I'll give you a sound pack. I had a sound pack company called Slap Experts. I'll give you that in exchange for that. Doesn't matter if the price is ridiculously higher than that. Got that model from watching things that happen in the industry. But when the independent finds a way to do it, then it's like, oh, you're cheating the system. You've cheated. It's like, no, I saw an opportunity, a very clear one, the one that I'm describing right now, and it gives me an opportunity to put that on the resume, move forward, and say, goal accomplished. Now let's get to the next thing. But for right now, it's like, it means something, but it doesn't mean anything. It means something to me because we accomplished it. I set a goal, got it. Now for me, it's getting into giving the value like I've always been doing, because that has been what's led me to everywhere I've gotten to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when you have those goals, you knock those goals down. What starts to be like the next? Like, do you have like a long-term plan, short-term plan, or are you just kind of like flying by day by day? Like,
No.
and how are you seeing that change as you're reaching these different levels of climbing the tallest part of the mountain?
I have 2 very clear big-time goals that I want to accomplish. And the same way Gary Vee always talks about buying the jets, these are kind of my Mount Olympus goals. I want to have a physical school for rappers and music producers that feeds them information that wasn't available to me when I was looking at the SAE Institute or looking at the MI. And there's nothing against those schools. I think those are great places, and they've produced a lot of my collaborators. But there's something different that I want to offer that I feel like is more relevant to what's going on, because artists have to be so much more than just artists themselves, right?
Yeah.
So I want to create that environment and really be an extension of the things that I've taught on my YouTube, but have teachers in there that do that. And another one is I want to have a 24-hour vegan restaurant. Someone told me after I shared it, they were like, what if you had the launch of the vegan restaurant be inside the school? And I said, that gave me goosebumps. I was like, that's all I had to hear. So in the meantime, I need to take full advantage of my youth and influence and my content creation skills, and learn how to systemize it, which is what I'm doing now. I'm writing down every step of how I do everything so I can delegate it. Once that's delegated, then I can start to grow at a faster rate and scale the right way. I tried to scale last year too soon, and I failed tremendously. And so I had to pick myself up again and jump back into it. And so now it is really about providing as much value as I can to build as much capital as I can along the way to create that school, to provide as much value as I can to independent artists so that I can create an exchange that allows me to start putting down the seed money for these ideas that I have.
Yeah.
But those are my 2 major goals. And so until then, if it's art, if it's my video editing, if it's my graphic designing, if I don't care by any means necessary, we will get it accomplished and we will generate that income. That's just my mentality on it.
It's amazing, dude.
Yeah, not afraid, and it's very rare that people are so afraid. They want to be the star player. I saw Patrick Beverly talking to a group of kids playing ball, and he's like, not all of y'all are going to be Siakam. Not all of y'all are going to be LeBron. Like, we need role players. And I think that because I was never afraid to be a role player, by default, it made me a leader in a lot of circumstances, and I didn't recognize it. I was just the person that was like, look, if I have to be the point guard and don't score, I'll do that. But even now, I'm recognizing with a little bit of wisdom, I'm 37 now, I look around and I'm like, I have to lead this. But not I have to, but I get to lead this. And my leadership's going to be different than the leaderships that I've been under before. I don't ever want it to feel like a dictatorship. I want it to feel like your input is valuable. And if it can get us to the best end result possible, by all means. I read in his book, quick story. I read in his book, I forget the name of it. It was about teamwork, but they basically talked about, and I'm going to butcher the story, but they basically talked about two groups of folks. They gave them a challenge to build a house out of popsicle sticks or something crazy like that. The first group was like second graders, first graders. The other group were like Harvard students, folks who were like, they should know all the physics of this. They put them to the test and gave them the same amount of time. The kids were the ones that did it first.
Huh.
Why? Because they were smarter? No, because they hadn't had a struggle about deciding who was the leader of the group. The Harvard students did. Well, I think I should lead this because my major is in this. No, I think I should because I have, I've dealt with popsicles. Like, they had discussions like that. The kids were like, no. You want to do that? I'll help you. That is what I've always come underneath to understand. Like, I may not be the most talented person in the room that I go to. Many times I'm not, especially with the circles I'm around. But I am the person that's going to be the easiest to work with. Somebody that when you leave the studio or I leave the studio, you will not feel drained.
Yeah.
It's always been my goal. If I can do that, I get invited to so many rooms that I'm just asking myself, God, how did I get here? I know I have confidence in my skill set, and I know that I do what I do, but there's just certain situations that I'm just like, how is this possible?
Yeah.
Like, I've had Hannibal Buress on my couch for a podcast episode at my home, in Diego. I've had the guy from the Everest College commercial.
Wow.
I've interviewed him and did a whole video about that, and I'm like, in what world is this possible? And I'm doing this on my own. I'm reaching out to these folks, and they're trusting in me, and I'm like, I'm walking in purpose now. Some people may feel like, I feel like this would have been a better fit for you. It's funny, I talked to Salas. He's been an amazing mentor of mine about the work that I'm doing now. And he's like, I really don't understand it. I feel like I look at you and I'm like, man, what could have been? And I'm like, man, I don't think you recognize that I'm stepping into my true form. I'm stepping into my super form now in this other space. And I'm giving what I've been giving in fractions along the way and what's been revealed to me all the way now.
Yeah.
And I'm seeing and reaping the benefits of that. I'm seeing every single day somebody is telling me how a video that I did 3 years ago or yesterday has affected their lives and has influenced them to do this on their own or whatever the case may be. I see that every single day. So the worst I could ever have is a good day. This is a work of purpose. I couldn't ask for anything better. Yeah.
Shit, dude. It's beautiful.
I appreciate that.
That's really exciting.
Yeah. It's the younger me on the PlayStation didn't see this as the idea of success.
Yeah.
To me, this would look like the younger me would look at this and say, "Oh, you must not have made it." But I think that what's important, man, it's so unfortunate because how many geniuses do you meet in this line of work? You record them, you see their musical genius, but because of something like they had a little one that with the baby moms that they don't get along with, and it just tears mental health down, and that is the thing that stops them. Or someone else where they have all this promise and they get in one deal and it just feels like the politics just eats them alive and they become a shell of themselves. Mm-hmm. Like, how many times do you see that? And it's like, what is making it? What is success?
Yeah.
Tim Ferriss in the 4-Hour Workweek talks about, before you decide your career, decide what kind of lifestyle you want. And I look at it and I'm like, I define success as having the flexibility to do my job and at any given point in time, stop it and be able to put my son on my lap. That's my success. Have my son on my lap and break whatever I'm doing to talk to him. And my son, he's on the spectrum, so it's like it's even more important for me to be active within his life, still working, but active in his life, and let him know that his time is so important to me. I look at that and I'm like, this is the life for me. The fact that I get to, talk to my buddies, my real friends about going on tour, and it's like a thing, and they're like, how can we involve our families? Like, that's just like,
yeah.
I look at like Toby Nigway, and I'm like looking at the new independent. I'm looking at the stories that are possible that at one time we didn't think are possible, and I'm like, bro, this is success for me. It is not a Grammy for me, right? It's being able to see the first moments of my son walking. It's being able to know that I wasn't in a different state when he first said "da." Being able to know that I can take him at any given point to go get some ice cream or whatever he wants to go get. Knowing that my wife, like we got a 5-bedroom house, and it's only 3 of us, but we got a 5-bedroom house. We didn't get that because we were like balling out of control or because we wanted to stunt. We did it because we wanted every room to be a business. My wife has a press-on nail business. She customizes and designs them herself. She's in the past done like launched other businesses, and I'm like, this is success for me. This is happiness for me because of the freedom that I have to get up today and say, what do you want to create?
Yeah.
You want to edit today? Edit. Here's your station. And in having someone like my wife, that's just my teammate, man. That's something that can't be understated. Like that's my best friend. That's my road dog. And because of her, I can do so much of this. I can be out in LA, on a Saturday, just randomly pop up and then go back home and edit my podcast.
Yeah.
Edit my podcast tonight.
That's beautiful, dude. Honestly, it's amazing to go through the journey and have like the different stages of changes and pivots and pauses and push forward and, rediscovery. And to find that, I honestly feel like that's something, all that resonates a lot. I've been on the musical journey for like 16 years, and it is abusive in many ways, and a lot of them are self-inflicted. When you're just going through shit kind of head down, just busting through things, and you realize like it doesn't really actually need to be like this at all.
It's not normal.
Yeah.
And sometimes, correct me if I'm wrong, do you see it the most when you're talking to friends who don't operate by the same politics or the same algorithms as we do? Because we're certain things we kind of, like you said, it's self-inflicted strain and problems and abuse, but the things that we've come to like normalize, like the idea of paying dues. For the longest time, I think people thought it was like you take your punches, and it's like, well, what does that really mean?
Yeah.
And then you get to somebody else and they're like, yeah, we don't do that in our industry. What is that?
Yeah, I mean, like music's definitely a unique career. And, it's been morphing like exponentially every 5 to 10 years in terms of like the technology that's existing in it for, how you utilize it or how it chews up a previous generation. Right. Like how you adapt, how you navigate, how you learn, how you move forward. Like there's so many different eras, like even just for our careers alone. Like I watched, like essentially like the beginning of my career was like watching artists get featured on blogs. And that was like how you entered the world. And that was like your key of like, oh man, if you got blogs circulating your music, you're already having an audience that you should now be able to go book shows and perform, and people know who you are when you go to these places because you were put in front of an audience. And then that died.
Nowhere. It was just done.
And then it was like, oh, now these streaming companies are happening, and everybody's used to paying $9.99 and just putting a playlist on that's AI curated, and you don't know who you're listening to. You're not really sure you're ever going to go see them perform. But as an artist, you now have to navigate this new pathway of like, fuck, people aren't connecting to me anymore. Nobody has any idea that it's my music. It just becomes this part of your press play on the playlist and go back to doing whatever it is you're doing, and you're not connected in that same way where like the blog era was like, oh, let me go see who's new today, and like I have a name and a face and I'm investing time and energy, and I love doing this as a scouting thing, to reduce to like kind of being in this playlist cycle, which is a little bit more like playing the lottery and hoping that you hit, I mean, there's obviously strategy, and there's a reason why some people are much more successful than others, but just having to constantly adapt, and there's a lot of industries that don't necessarily require you to do that. Like if you work in the food industry, chances are
it's very clear.
You're cooking every day, motherfucker. And it's
exactly
like
what you got to do. They got a protocol book.
Yeah. The oven's still the same. The food still comes. You know what I mean?
No
like
matter
it's
where you go. It's this.
Yeah. So we're working in one of those places that happens to be like highly at the front end of technology and having to adapt at all times. You get hung out to dry if you're not really, like I still have never fucked with TikTok, and like everybody in the last 5 years, it's not like I wasn't aware of it, but literally fucking everybody is like, dude, if you do music, you have to be present there. Like it's just the place where everybody's doing their thing in music now, and Instagram's this dead space, and but it's like you constantly are having to be like adapting these things into your life, and it's fucking exhausting.
Very.
And some people are lucky because they came in and that's their starting point. And it's like, oh shit, I did this TikTok thing and it hit, and and it became a super success and it launched my career. And meanwhile, we're all trailing back like, damn, had only that been my,
but that's not what it was in the stars. But I still feel like also from what you're talking about, and it's kind of crazy because I kind of feel like you're helping me to connect a dot that I didn't see before. But blogs were a very big deal for me.
Yeah.
At one point, for a lot of us, it was. But I was not getting posted on like the Two Doughboys and the major ones, so I had to figure out what's the independent, what's the mom and pop blogs. So I would find anybody that would post a music video, like when you and I would release a video. I would go run on search on Twitter, not just the major blogs, but I wanted to see who else posted them as like, I don't want to say copying, but kind of like mirroring what they were doing.
Yeah, like
and
a hobbyist.
I would find those other blogs, and I would go search for their emails, and I would send them individual emails. I never would do mass emails, individual emails. I would do even a little bit of research, and I would tell them, I said, hey, based upon these artists, my Apple Music or whatever says that I'm similar to these artists, or Last FM, whatever it was. Just wanted to kind of present my music and tell you this is what I am. And that approach got me posted on so many that I was getting posted on so many of these mom and pop blogs that the bigger ones started to see like, oh, we always see your stuff there. So I had to find a different way to go about it. But what I felt like, even with the shift and everything that's happened with this industry, it's getting back to the people that separate themselves. The Russells are the ones who find a way to reach out and make a connection that the metaverse can't, reach out and make a connection that social media can't. Because what I'm learning is that there's a lot of producers who are finding success on the internet, finding success even somewhat in the industry, that are afraid of people.
Yeah.
They'll never leave. Like the only time you'll see them talking comfortably is in front of a camera on the phone. That to me felt like, well, I have the biggest advantage because I had to come into the game talking to people. I had to, I had to like understand what network even meant. So now with me doing the YouTube video, I didn't even recognize I've been doing this for almost 10 years now. And there's a generation of kids that have went from, I'm just a snot-nosed kid on YouTube looking up stuff. I've grown up with them. And now they're artists that are, doing successful things in their neighborhood. Now they're the new artists that we all know about that at one point in time were just like any of us searching on YouTube. I'm one of the first voices that come up. But this is why I wanted to also put a hyper focus on mental health and not just how to make beats, not just the creative process of FL Studio. Mental health was so important because I started seeing at a very early stage of content creation how many rappers were dying, how many artists were just falling by the wayside, being used. I remember a producer said in the internet space named Mr. Postman said that producers have shorter career spans than football players. And something about that stat just made me recognize how many of my friends, my brothers that are going into this industry, that as soon as they're done with you, they chew you up, spit you out, and you got to have to figure out how to pick up the pieces. and not everybody figures out how to pick up the pieces. But the beautiful thing is, you've been here so long that you've probably forgotten more than some people will ever learn, because they don't have the abundance of having the reach that we have.
Yeah.
But so many of them don't tap into that because there's jobs that literally didn't exist. I had to come into this space speaking very humbly and create new jobs where it was like, it sounded crazy to my peers out in LA to say, so you're quitting rapping as your main thing, you're selling beats online, you're going to make YouTube videos about what? Well, teaching them things that they wouldn't otherwise be exposed to because I'm close to LA and folks who are actually in this music industry. It just sounds like a bad idea. Fast forward now, everybody's making content. You don't have a career, like you said. If you don't have a TikTok, you don't have a music career, quote unquote. But the one separating factor, I think, that no matter what, is people's ability to connect with people. Even Instagram. I've been on Instagram for probably 8-9 years. Never had a post that went to 1 million. The moment I turned the camera around and I said, I'm going to do 30-second videos instead of 1 minute and just give some inspirational quotes that come to mind. Some very thoughtful and encouraging notes. I shared it, gave a little bit of cinematic twinge to it. First video gets 1.5 million. Never seen it before. First year after 9 years of I've been doing consistently Instagram. And mind you, I almost deleted my Instagram a year before, but that's another story for another day. Then a month later, my next million happens again. I'm 37. Then my project comes out, and DIY 2, #1 album on the Hip Hop iTunes charts. I remind everybody listening, I'm 37. And in hip hop years, that's like...
You're 105.
105, right? Like, unless you're in a space where you've already established yourself, you're looked at in a certain way. You're still... I'm 37, and I say that, and I want to repeat that, especially for those who are in that age group that feel like it's the end. And something I remember from Tony Robbins, he says, whether you believe it's the end or the beginning of something, you're absolutely right. And the results will show that. I always feel like after I accomplish something, I check it off the box, it's the beginning of something else. It's not the end of anything. It's the beginning of something else. And now this is the beginning of my place as an elder statesman in this independent sphere, as a DIYer, original DIYer, the guy that had to teach himself video editing, graphic design, and all that good stuff. Now that's like the norm to have some information about Canva, whatever. I have to look at myself now. Folks are addressing me as the OG in that space, and this is my time period to give even more, but at the same time, not forget that my ability to create is why they listen. If I don't have anything that's worth listening to, why would I take advice from this guy?
Sure.
So it's a beautiful balance between, it used to be when you teach in hip hop, that meant that you were done.
Yeah.
You're done rapping. You're done. Now there's a space that exists that says I'm in my best period, because now it's like when I look at LeBron's at a place where he doesn't use his body in the same way he did in his 20s, but he spends $1 million every year on his body because he recognizes the stability is what he's really going to need, and he utilizes it in the best way. I'm trying my best now to utilize the value I give, the music I create, and just create a world that somebody comes into and they're like, you gave me more than what I came in here with. That's it.
Yeah. It's beautiful, dude.
I win. That's it.
Yeah. Yeah. Look, man, that has and will take you the farthest. It's like there's a reason why that mentality shift and that goal and that mantra is bringing you the most success, you know?
Yeah. And happiness, man.
I don't mean that like literally. I mean like literally the success like you're talking about. Like that's
it.
The defining difference is it's not like, oh, it's making me the most money and I'm happy because I have all this material shit, but it's literally like bringing you, the ability to say, oh man, like I can define exactly how I want to live and make my success because I'm able to share these things and people appreciate, my wisdom, my experience, my style, and you've been through a lot of shit, dude.
Man, and yeah, it's just a reminder that your journey's not over. Like no matter where you're at, your journey's not over. The best years are not behind you unless you believe that. And I'm looking at it now and I'm recognizing that I am being ushered into doing things that I've never done before, and it's terrifying and it's exciting that it finally have something that terrifies me. Not finally, but I have it again.
Yeah.
I never want to lose that into my 40s, into my 50s. I never want to lose that when I launch the school, when we get the restaurant. I never want to lose that. I'm going to forever put myself in situations where, man, this is going to require me to grow in an uncomfortable way, because growth is not supposed to be comfortable.
Right.
You buy new shoes when your feet are crushing up against the shoes, and you need new shoes. I'm ready to grow. I'm not hindering that process, and I'm accepting it all as it comes, staying pretty damn stoic all the way through it.
Hey, man,
Absolutely.
head down and just knocking out the goals.
Yeah.
Beautiful note to end on, man. This was really great. I'm really thankful that we did this.
Man, thank you for inviting me, bro.
Yeah, absolutely. What would be the best places you want to direct people to?
CurtisKing.com. It's a
Cool.
great place to start. 2 S's. CurtisKing.com. That has my courses. That has my book. It has my sound packs. For those who are producers that are listening, I have my first sound pack on Splice, Westside Rage. DIY 2 is out right now on all distributors. My YouTube channel, Curtis King TV. But if you go to CurtisKing.com, it'll lead you to all the social media and all that good stuff. But yeah, man, thank you for having me, bro.
Hell yeah, man. Thank you, man. Thank you. Killer.